house, and if any Indian tries to stop me, I'll blast him.
You know, the only thing more pathetic than Indians on TV is Indians watching Indians on TV.
Hey everybody, it's Ian, back again for another episode of Native Film Talk. And it's so good to be back! I am almost done with school, everybody. Almost done, and then we will be back with our regularly scheduled programming with the super ambitious goal of doing it every week. I was doing it for a while there, and I fell off. School got hectic, life got hectic, everything got hectic, and frankly, I just didn't have the time. Normally, I would own up to my excuses and say, Ian slacked off, Ian wasn't making the time, Ian wasn't doing this, Ian wasn't doing that. I was stretched so thin, I just didn't have the ability to do it. But here we are, finally doing what I said I was going to do like a month ago. And today we're going to talk about Magnificent 7, a.k.a. Mag 7, a.k.a. A Bug's Life, a.k.a. Three Amigos, a.k.a. Seven Samurai, a.k.a. any time in history where somebody turns somebody upside down and shakes the coins from them. This story is as old as time itself, and it's a great story that Hollywood loves to tell. A town, a group of people is powerless against a foe, and they need to find a way to protect themselves, and they can't because they're too weak, they don't have the skill, they don't have the resources, so they set out to find some heroes, some warriors, some cast-offs, people who will accept a bounty or recognition or acceptance into a community in exchange for their services. And that's what happens in this movie. 2016, directed by Antoine Fuqua. This is the Training Day crew back at it again. You got Ethan Hawke, Antoine Fuqua, and good old Denzel frickin' Washington. So when this movie was, when Antoine Fuqua decided to do this with Denzel again, the people were just lining up because Training Day just was next level. Training Day caught fire. They also worked together on The Equalizer, but people were mostly riding on Training Day. They were so excited for the opportunity. So everybody was lining up. When they heard those two were back and making this movie, Chris Pratt, Vincent D'Onofrio, Ethan Hawke wanted to be in this again, and they wanted to work together again because they caught lightning in the bottle that first time. They wanted to be a part of the magic. They wanted to work with these greats, and so that's what happened. And it was pretty awesome to see a native be brought into this. Out of all of the remakes they've done in history, out of all these freaking remakes, this is the first time where they've had this trope, this like kind of A Bug's Life story, this recycled plot. It's the first time you've ever introduced a native in it. And this Magnificent 7 2016 version is unique in that, well, it's not unique in that it's a bunch of cast-offs, but it's usually a group of cast-offs, a bunch of loners. But in this case, they focus on a lot of minority representation, which I thought was refreshing, because you had Denzel, the African-American man, you had Lee Byung-kim, you had Vincent D'Onofrio, who was Byung-hun Lee. Byung-hun Kim was a closer for the Diamondbacks in the early 2000s, and I, for some reason, mixed up his name. Anyway, Byung-hun Lee as Billy Rocks. He's the Asian kind of cast-off. Vincent D'Onofrio is the nomadic person, the weird cast-off, the eccentric person living in the forest. And, Chris Pratt, just a degenerate gambler. Martin Sensmeier is the Comanche lone warrior off on his own, even exiled. Maybe not exiled, but carving his own path away from his community. And you even have a woman who is a widow in this, and in these times, a woman being by herself, setting out and trying to do things on her own was not natural, not normal in those days. So there was a lot of challenging of old kind of standards, which I really appreciated. As a whole for this movie, it was pretty awesome. So let's talk about Martin. Overall, and so this was the first time I've actually seen this. Watching this movie for the episode might surprise some people because you would think I would have watched this as soon as it came out. But In 2016, I don't know, I was in a dark place. Maybe not a dark place is the right word. I just was, with movies, with remakes, I was so over it. When I saw Magnificent Seven, I was just like, are you fucking kidding me? Another remake? Another one? The market was saturated. You had Conan the Barbarian with Jason Momoa. You had Dread remakes. You had Blade Runner, which was okay. Total Recall, which was awful. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Flatliners. The remakes were just pouring out. They were busting at the seams with remakes. So when I saw Magnificent Seven, I wasn't the least bit excited. Even though Denzel was in it, even though Chris Pratt was in it, and Antoine Fuqua was at the helm, I was like, it's not for me. And frankly, I didn't even pay attention to me at the time in 2016 that it didn't dawn on me that there was a native in it because I completely just dismissed it. You look at the Magnificent Seven poster, the main one that's on like the DVD cover, the Blu-ray cover, the main poster where the seven are all lined up in a battle pose. You look at the far left, Martin is off in the corner. So if you're not looking at every single one of those, it doesn't jump out to you like, oh, there's a native in this. So I missed it. And when it came on my list, I was kind of excited because at that point, late last year, late 2020, I was a Martin fan. I had learned more about Martin's career and kind of the work he's been known for. And this was the one that I had not really looked into. So I was excited to watch this one. And I will talk a little bit more about Martin's roles and really some of the other people's roles, not so much when we get to the cast review. But this was good because this is really his breakout role in the sense that he got regular work on a national, on the worldwide scale, global scale. This put him on the market. After this, he started working in Westworld, and he was in Wind River. But still, this is his most known role to non-natives. I would say everyone across the board kind of knows him from this movie. And I'll tell you, this movie didn't disappoint. Even though it took me a while to get around to this, it's a popcorn movie. It's not gonna, there's the rewatch value. If you're into action movies, you're gonna rewatch this. But, to me, I saw it once, I'm good. I'm not gonna go watch it again. I might go watch Martin's scenes again, or I might go watch the scenes with Jonathan Joss in it, John Redcorn. But I'm not gonna go and watch this entire movie again. I got what I needed out of it. It was solid though. Solid movie. So I will say, seeing this now, seeing Martin on this cast is insane. When Martin was cast in the film, he was ecstatic, obviously, because he really didn't have any acting work that was prominent up to this point. But Antoine Fuqua, when he initially hired him, his hair was long. He had long hair, and if you are a Martin fan, at one time he had these long, luscious locks. And at some point, he cut it right before the filming of the movie started, and he kind of danced around it, and I never really looked into that part, but it seems like maybe it was a time of mourning, something happened with the family. But Antoine, when they were going in the special features of the Blu-ray, he said that Martin disappeared for a bit to go home, and then he came back and all his hair was cut off. And if you're native, you kind of know what that means. And they didn't really explain it, didn't really address it. So I don't want to dig too much into it, but you can draw those conclusions for yourself. But I think they had plans to utilize his long hair, and so they made do. They didn't do what normal Hollywood would have done, I think, of like, oh, we casted you for your long hair, buddy. We're either going to give you extensions or change your role or worse, is cut your part or cut you for somebody else that has the look. And instead, they kind of made their own look. The look that Martin has in this movie isn't... And he's Comanche, but his look isn't Comanche. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. I feel a little up and down about it, but we'll explore that as we move along. But overall, homies from Alaska. He took off to Alaska one time, came back, hair was cut off, but they were like, all right, we'll roll with it. We'll figure it out. And hats off to Antoine Fuqua for just like saying, hey, I get it. We'll work with it. Sucks. It's a shock, but let's do it. And good for Martin. He could have, I'm assuming it's for cultural reasons he cut his hair. He could have just set those aside and said, no, I need the long hair because that's the look that Hollywood's looking for. That's the look. Because long hair does not equal Native American. But in Hollywood, a lot of times it does. The other native in this has long hair. So Martin is a little bit of a cast-off in that regard, that he has short hair and he is native in this movie. So for that alone, Martin should be praised, that he just, was still able to get through this movie despite all that. So let's jump into the cast. Legendary cast. At the helm is Denzel Washington as Chisholm. I keep trying to say that name because it's written, it's like Chisolm. I keep wanting to say Chisholm. As Chisholm, he is the leader of the pack. Chris Pratt, obviously Denzel, if you're a fan of Denzel, everyone has their favorite Denzel movies. Malcolm X, Remember the Titans, The Hurricane, gosh, the list goes on. Fences, Philadelphia. Denzel is just Denzel. He's legendary. So I was real happy to see him in this role, and I'm sure it was just an honor. Martin had nothing but positive things to say about Denzel, and everybody was just like, God, it was amazing to work with this man, and I can only imagine. Chris Pratt is Josh Faraday. Chris Pratt, you mostly, I know him mostly from Guardians of the Galaxy and, Jurassic World rather. So, Chris Pratt was in it. He did a great job. He's always good for comic relief. Ethan Hawke, Goodnight Robichaud was his character. And he was kind of a disappointing character, but overall, I'm happy to see Ethan Hawke. I was a huge fan from his original, way back in the Dead Poet Society days, way back in the, what was the movie where they crashed in the Andes and they had to eat each other? What the hell was that movie called? Alive. He was great in Alive. That was another movie and ever since then I've always just been an Ethan Hawke fan and always rooted for him. So I was happy to see him in this. Vincent D'Onofrio as Jack Horn. Vincent D'Onofrio, he was a great villain in the Daredevil TV series. And then Byung-Hun Lee, who I keep confusing with Byung-Young Kim, as Billy Rocks. And he was the knife aficionado is not the right word, but he was the knife expert. He was the knife thrower, and I loved it. Manuel Garcia Rolfo as Vasquez, who is the wanted man that they hired. And Martin Sensmeier as Red Harvest. Red Harvest. Great freaking character. Great name. Haley Bennett as Emma Cullen. She's the one who gets her husband. Her husband is killed at the beginning of the film, and then kicks off the entire movie. And then Bartholomew Bogue, who is the big villain, who's as Peter Sarsgaard plays this character. And then the last person that I will introduce, and he is the only other native that's prominent in this movie, and that is John Redcorn. Well, really, his name is Jonathan Joss, but he played John Redcorn. That is his primary role. He was John Redcorn in King of the Hill, obviously, but he was also, for those of you that are Parks and Recs fans, he was Ken Hotate in Parks and Rec. So if you're a fan of that, I'm sure you recognized him. If you didn't know he was John Redcorn, it's pretty refreshing. When I found that out, I was like, holy shit, that's John Redcorn. Well. John Redcorn. Love that TV show. So it was good. He plays Denali. He is the Comanche kind of just henchman to Bogue, and it was pretty awesome. So let's jump into it. Plot review. This is basically A Bug's Life, Seven Samurai, and the original one. There's not a whole lot of change. It's set in 1879. Town of Rose Creek is controlled by Bogue. Really, Bogue has a gold mine nearby, and he's a mining tycoon, land baron, and he terrorizes the town by really, at gunpoint, you're going to sell me this land, and you're going to pay this, you're going to sell it to me for this amount, which is below rock bottom prices. And so they're just like, what the hell? He keeps coming, taking our men, basically having indentured servitude, being in prison at this mine, working for him, making money, and selling our land. Sound familiar, anybody? So that's really how it begins. The town's like, all right, we've had enough. We got to figure out a way to do this. And Bogue basically puts him at an ultimatum and is like, all right, the entire town, everybody here, you are going to sell to me for $20. No questions asked. I'm going to be back in 2 weeks' time. And you bugs better have my food. Grasshoppers, fly away. And that's kind of like how it plays out. And they're off. Before he takes off, Emma's husband decides to stand up. Bad idea. As soon as this guy started speaking, you're like, man, this guy's going to go down. But he tries to stand up to him. He's like, what kind of man are you? And Bogue ends up, taking him out. sets the church on fire and leaves. And so now Emma's like, I need to go find somebody to stop this guy. He just killed my husband. He's about to take all of our land. He's about to just remove us all from here, and we're going to end up homeless. We're going to have to go back on the road or face him, and we get shot. If we stand up to him, we're going to die. What do we do? So then she starts her search to go find a warrior, to go find some heroes to help fight back. Now, this opening scene is the first time we see John Redcorn. We see Jonathan Joss because he's Bogue's henchman, and so he is at Bogue's hip the entire movie. And I have no idea why he is wearing a blue velveteen shirt. No idea. He is wearing the scout uniform. So this is an uneducated. I'm gonna be very frank. I looked up stuff on Google, but anytime I see an outfit that it had basically his outfit, where it's like a velveteen shirt, wearing a sterling silver necklace with a bandana around his head. He's got long hair. He's got a concho belt on for whatever reason, a silver concho belt. This pisses me off because just wear regular clothes. Have you ever, as a Navajo person, I've worn these things. It is so damn hot in those. It is uncomfortably hot. I feel like if you're a henchman, you're going to be doing henchman stuff. You're going to be moving around. You're going to be lifting weights. You're going to be, no, not weight, dead weight. You're going to be lifting people, moving bodies. The chafing has got to be out of control. At a certain point, you would just make the compromise and say, hey, I noticed those white guys over there. They never chafe. I'm going to go put on some of their clothes. And then maybe, I don't know. But this to me is the typical, we need to put a sign over this person to let the audience know, hi, I'm a Native American. Hi, I'm an Indian. Because even in that opening scene, he's wearing a cowboy hat with a feather sticking out of it. Why? He's supposed to be. They never say what he is. His name is Denali. He's working for Bogue, so I would just assume he's Comanche, like Red Harvest, because at the end of the movie he calls him a disgrace, and it looks like he understands him. That's all before he kills him. But yeah, I have no idea what they were going for. No idea. But that's so. Here's a little bit of a history lesson that's frustrating. If you've ever seen any old photo from the early 1900s, that kind of has that like sepia filter looking thing on it, and where like the natives are just standing at the camera looking, and they're dressed in their traditional garb. There was a photographer called Edward Curtis, and he lived from the mid 1800s to basically the mid 1900s. He was like 80 years old or something. But his pictures are famous. You can Google Native American and traditional regalia, and you'll see a picture probably taken by Edward Curtis. He's published like thousands of photos that are in the Library of Congress, and that was the picture, that was the image of the Indian for the longest time. And his vision was, the reason why he set out to do this, he would travel across the country and to different reses and different native nations, and he would stage these photos. He would get these people to dress up in their traditional garb, and in some cases, he would make it so they wore extra shit that they wouldn't normally wear because, like, hey, this is a vanishing race. White people need to be able to document this, so when we're extinct and removed from this land, we can say, oh, that's so terrible. We exterminated these Indians. Look, they had such a beautiful culture. Oh, they got such long hair. Look at their beautiful big high. Look at their high cheekbones. Blah blah blah. And so Edward Curtis photos, like, they were really dressed up to be. You were wearing your Sunday best. You were wearing your traditional garb, your traditional regalia that was like you would wear for specific shit, like ceremonies, for like gatherings, for unions of families, for celebrations of life. You just wouldn't walk around every single day wearing that stuff. It's just like everybody else in society. You have different outfits for different situations based on the societal and community norms that you occupy. You wouldn't just be walking around in a freaking headdress every day, 24/7, and go to sleep like that. But because of pictures that Edward Curtis took, that framed the mindset of people who are non-native, not of these communities, of what native people look like. And that's how people ended up taking stuff like the native mascot. We're like, yeah, that looks Indian to me. That's what Indians look like. And so you see evidence of that in this freaking movie. When you look at Jonathan Joss's outfit, you're just like, bro, are you serious? And who knows, if we go back in time to 1879 and I go to, a Comanche village and they're all walking around like that, then I guess, I'll go fuck myself. And maybe I'm wrong, and I'll say that. But to me, just in the history of film that I've seen, all the movies I've seen where it's like a period piece, that's how natives are depicted. They're looked at as like, hey, let's go look at some Edward Curtis photos. Yep, that's close enough to me. Let's go stop at that arts and crafts stand. Let's go buy some of that sterling silver. Go put a feather in his cowboy hat so they know that he's native. I don't know. It was just whatever. Anyway, I spent a little bit too much time on that, but that part bothered me when I saw the beginning of that. And he was only in the a few seconds, 10 seconds collectively, probably in the first 20 minutes of the movie for him. But yeah, I just saw that as problematic. Problematic's a strong word. It stuck out to me, and it bothered me specifically. If it didn't bother anybody else, I get it. So after this, Emma takes off. She goes and finds Denzel, and I'm going to blow through this. I'm going to try to focus more on the native part of this and really just try to talk about how they're exiles. But Denzel is in another town, Sam Chisholm, and he's a bounty hunter. He's looking for Powder Dan. He finds him, kills him. Emma sees him do this. Emma brings her friend along, and she sees him do this. So she's like, oh, there's a guy I can recruit. There's a guy I can recruit to save us. And she tries to make her pitch, and he's like, can't afford me. I'm too much, And then she says, like, hey, but Bogue is there. He's terrorizing our town. And Sam's like, what? Bogue? Did you say Bogue? I know Bartholomew Bogue. You're going to need an army to take him down. And so he's like, I accept, and I will take your money, and I will form a team. And in this same town, Chris Pratt, a.k.a. Josh Faraday, is in town. He is cheating at a gambling scheme that he has, and he eventually gets confronted by people he's, screwed over in the past, and, basically demonstrates his power in that he's deceptive. He's a gunman. But he also tries to get his horse back because he's a gambler. He's a degenerate gambler. And so he gambled away his horse, and he's trying to make a deal with the guy who won his horse. And so to get Denzel comes along and gets Chris Pratt on board by saying, like, hey, I will get your car out of the impound, basically. I will pay the impounding fee if you come with us. And so he agrees, basically. And he's like, hey, there's only two of us. You seem like you're hot shit, and I want to be a part of this team. So then the roundup starts. Now there's two of them. And I'll kind of run through this. Then they nab Vasquez, and Vasquez is a wanted man, and Chisholm is a known bounty hunter, and Vasquez is like, all right, so what do I get out of this? He said, when this is all over, I will not hunt you down. Out of all the people that are trying to collect this bounty on your head, I'm not going to be one of them. And that's enticing of a deal enough for Vasquez. He's like, all right, I'm on board. Now they got three. Then they go to Volcano Springs, where we meet Billy Rocks, and we meet Goodnight Robichaud. And the two are running a hustle in town where you have a face-off and people bet on this face-off. And it's going to, this shootout. And Billy Rocks is a knifeman. He doesn't use his knife. He doesn't use a gun, sorry. And he faces off with anybody with a gun. And he bets that he can, Goodnight is the collector and Billy Rocks is the prize fighter. And so everyone bets, like, there's no way that this Asian guy throwing a knife can beat somebody with a gun. And he does, and they collect, and they run their hustle, blah, 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 blah. But we find out that Robichaud is the person they're going after. Billy Rocks is just there. He met up with Robichaud somewhere along his history. And so Denzel wanted Emma to go find Robichaud and Chris Pratt to go find Robichaud. They didn't know about Billy Rocks, but Billy Rocks gets tied in, and they're like, all right, Robichaud's like, you want me? You got to bring Billy too. So now they got 5. And then they go to Vasquez and Emma and Denzel, and they're all sitting there, and they're like, all right, where's everybody at? And they're reunited with the crew. And they're like, we got one more guy to get. This mountain man, Vincent D'Onofrio. Jack Horn's up next. He's eccentric. He lives off in the corner. He's a trapper of sorts. He's just like covered in hides all over, and he's got a bunch of hide clothing and a comment. So the reason why is he's a trapper, he's a trader, he collects hides and he trades them. There's a little bit of native representation here and native education in this scene where Chisholm asks him, you still collecting scalps? And Faraday interjects and says, the government don't pay a bounty on Redskins anymore. You must be out of work. And that's all that's said. But this is awesome to hear in a movie in 2016 because from what I could find online, and from what I could remember, there legitimately was a time where the government would pay a bounty for native scalps, and hence the term Redskins. And so the government would place a bounty on native when there were quote-unquote problem areas where natives were disruptive, and they would basically say, like, hey, if you want to make some extra cash, you can get rid of this native problem we got, and we'll give you some money, because if you give us a scalp, that's proof that you killed them, or that they're not going to be a nuisance anymore. And so that stopped. Maybe not stopped. Stopped is a strong word. It was not as publicized and paid for by the government around like the 50s. So because that was online, I'm going to assume that bled into the 60s, probably the early 70s, where they were actually like collecting money. And this movie takes place in 1879, so that kind of checks out. So the timeline aligns with this story, and I was just surprised this was in there. Even though it's just a line, a drop, it gives the audience a reason at least to think like, hey, there was a time where we freaking paid people to kill natives and take their scalps and give it to the government. The government. They would give you a bounty. Thank you, 2016. Thank you, Magnificent Seven. So Jack Horn decides to join, and now they have 6. And this next scene is where we get introduced to Martin, but the 6 are riding in through a canyon, and on their way into the canyon, they see some burial trees. So this is kind of new to me in a movie where I'm paying attention. Once I saw these burial stands, they have these kind of stanchions set up, and they have the bodies sitting on top of the stands. I've seen this in movies before, and I've seen this in kind of in documentaries and history books, but I've never really dug into it of like, who does this? What's the purpose? How prevalent is this in Native communities and Native histories? But this was odd to me because they're in the Southwest. I don't see that in the Southwest. And so in my cursory digging, trying to be, I was a Native American Studies major in college, but I wasn't a Native American Studies history focus. So I did my best. But there's always a practical reason natives do this stuff. It's not born out of romanticism. It's not like, oh, because they want to be closer to the ancestors. It's like, no, because there's predators. They don't want their bodies of their loved ones to be eaten. They don't want, or the frost line is too low. We can't dig down that far to get below the frost line. Or where there's potential for flash floods, and we don't want to bury them and then see their body a few days later. There's a litany of reasons that they would do this, and in the most times, it's practical. Not most, it's always practical. And so, in the Southwest, I don't see this being a practice, at least from what I've found. It seems to be more prevalent when you're at sea level, or when you're in an area where there's extreme cold, and you just physically can't dig because everything's frozen over. If somebody dies in the winter, what are you going to do with the body? You can't physically dig into the ground to bury them. In the Southwest, I know for Navajo people, we would find caves, we would find crevices, we would find hillsides, and we would tuck them away and cover their body with rocks. At least that's kind of like the gist of it. And so they were in a canyon, and that's what baffled me. They were in a canyon where there's caves and crevices where you would wrap these bodies in hides and probably tuck them away. But instead, it's a movie, it's Hollywood. They put them in stands, and they have feathers draped or tied to these stands. And they're like blowing in the wind, and you're like, ooh, we got some Indian stuff coming up. Ooh, we got an Indian burial ground over here. And so, we're just like, geez, people. Geez, really? So they're just, some of the stuff was on point. Some of the stuff was just like, what kind of research did you guys do for this? And you're just like, yeah, that's some Indian shit we can get behind. Let's put that in the movie. So, at this point, they dock for the night. And then in the morning, enter the man of the hour, Martin himself, a.k.a. Red Harvest. We're introduced to Red Harvest, and Jack Horn, Vincent D'Onofrio's character, is like, hey, we're being tracked by somebody. He wakes everybody up. He's like, come on. Everybody is freaked the fuck out because they just see this one native riding up on a horse. His horse is covered in paint. He's covered in paint. And you're like, what the hell is going on? He rides up silently, and I'm not going to lie, historical inaccuracies aside with some of this shit, he looks fucking badass. This is like the Sunnylandum Night Wolf territory where it's like, I don't know, I can take some liberties with native representation if you make us to look badass. And that's kind of where this is. And what I think is cool is everybody is scared of him. These 6 people that are badasses, they're all scared of him. And they're all just like, who is this guy? What is he about? He doesn't have a gun. He just has a bow and arrow, but they're still all a little dodgy. And Denzel is aware that he's Comanche, and he speaks to him. And everyone in the 6 is like, what the hell? You can speak, where did that come from? What's he saying? And Denzel fucking Washington speaks Comanche in this movie. I'm not Comanche, but I was happy for Comanche people. How often do you hear Comanche spoken on the big screen? It's Navajo, it's Lakota, it's dominated by these kind of larger languages that people are accustomed to hearing. Maybe not people, even among Indian country. We're used to hearing those spoken more than others. And frankly, everyone's probably tired of it. They're probably just like, geez, there's so many other native, that's why like Hostels was refreshing for people, because they're like, oh, Cheyenne. Somebody's speaking Cheyenne. It's not just the same old Navajo and Lakota, in movies that we see. Same thing with Wonder Woman when Eugene Braverock spoke Blackfoot. People were just like, oh, that's awesome. And his words himself, it's not just Navajo, it's not just Lakota. It was great to see that. And I'm sure Comanche felt the same. But it was cool to see Denzel just come in and speak Comanche. And they subtitled it, and it was great. And he's the only person in the group. There is no other. Red Harvest is there by himself. And I love that Chisholm asks him if he speaks, quote, the white man's English, unquote, in Comanche. And he replies a little bit, some. And so the convo resumes with Chisholm, with Denzel speaking English, and Martin speaking in Comanche. And Red Harvest is alone because his elders told him his path is different. And Chisholm's like, well, you know what? All of us 6 here, our paths are different too. Our path is to fight wicked men. We're going to go fight some wicked men right now, and we're all probably going to die. And that's some crazy shit that Red Harvest can get on board with, though. And now on his horse, he has a dead carcass. He has a dead deer. He unties the deer from the saddle horn, boom, throws him off to the side, and he cuts open the deer, cuts out an organ, it appears to be the liver, and he takes that raw liver out, he hands it to Denzel, and he says, here you go, here's our offering, that's how we break bread, and he takes a bite out of it. And then Red Harvest then takes a big bite out of the raw meat, and Chisholm's just like, all right, everybody, he's with us. I had my breakfast. Everyone can get theirs. And I don't know about this one. This one, I don't know. I'll talk about this a little bit more, but while this may be accurate to a point, it's the othering that intentionally made this to be othering. That this native person is far different than everybody else in the movie. Far different. He's a loner. He lives on his own. He eats raw meat. Only speaks Comanche. They kind of flip this stuff a little bit on its head later in the movie, but that scene really made it so, because he's the only person in the movie that doesn't eat cooked food. And I disagree with that fact in the movie. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. There are instances where you need to eat raw meat because that's all you got, but that's not all we ate. And he doesn't eat anything else other than raw meat in this movie. If he ate like raw vegetables, raw grains and oats and nuts and shit, and then I'd be like, okay, well, that's the angle they're going for. But he just eats raw meat in this movie. And he's the only one that wears war paint over his whole face. John Redcorn's just got some streaks throughout this movie, Jonathan Joss, but I'll move on. So then they make it to the back to Rose Creek, and I'll kind of blow through this one. They got a gunfight as soon as they get in the town, and why this is important is Red Harvest is capable, and he's badass. He only uses a bow and arrow in this scene, but god damn it, he's a sniper. He's a freaking sniper. I want to venture out there, boys. Sniper's got talent. Like, he is awesome. It's the first time I've ever seen a native using his bow skills like a sniper, outside of the, the Rambo remake in I can't remember what year it was, but, and the first one where Stallone came back when he was older. That's the only time I've ever seen somebody use a bow like a sniper. And this was awesome. This was John Rambo-esque, and I loved it. And Bogue's henchmen, they're all taken out except for one. He's the one that makes it back to Sacramento to tell them, like, hey, these guys are in town. So yeah, and why this is important is after that, the town rallies around these guys. They're like, hey, you're not lying. You're really here to protect us. And then they pull out all the stops. They clear out a bar or saloon for the night, and they give them a hero's feast. And they're like, you got rid of these henchmen that were in town, so here, let us repay you. And that scene that night is important because while they're breaking bread, while the seven are sitting there eating and enjoying their hero's meal, Red Harvest doesn't eat. He is sitting at the table with everybody else, and everyone is feasting because they're fucking hungry. Look at all the work they did that day. He throws his plate on the table, and he smells it, and he's disgusted. He looks at the beans and meat, and he says, white man food is for dogs in Comanche. And he pushes the table away, or pushes his plate away. And I was just like, what? That perpetuates the idea further that he wants his food to be wild. He wants raw meat. He doesn't want it served on a plate. He wants it straight from his hand. Adds to that othering that happens in movies. Even though it's more of in a positive sense in this movie because Martin's badass, Red Harvest is badass, clearly they're so different from us. These natives are so different. Oh gosh, these natives are so different. Look, he doesn't even want a plate. He can barely sit in that chair looking at me, so uncomfortable. He wants to jump out of his own skin and go back out and jump on the back of a deer and slit its throat and eat its raw heart while it's still beating. That's what they want to push in this movie. And he doesn't say shit to anybody this entire time. Everyone's making jokes, cracking jokes, talking about their old girlfriends and their wives and, all that shit. And then he doesn't say anything. He's the stoic native. This gets broken a little bit toward the end of the movie, but up to this point, he doesn't even take off his bow and arrow. He's sitting in a chair and still with the bow over his chest, like draped over his body. Anyway. Day after the meal, this is where it starts to turn for the better, though. You know what happens? Red Harvest doesn't have any war paint on. He's just chilling. There's no fighting. There's no wars. There's nothing going on. He's just chilling. He's got no war paint on his body at all. He's just a brown dude walking around. He's still got the same clothes on, but he's just walking around. And this was badass. That's significant to me because we're not static characters, and I love that. Whereas in the previous period pieces, those people would wear the same headdress, the same goddamn war paint the entire movie because that's how we wake up, that's how we fall asleep. Edward Curtis photos back to that. So now the community wants to rely on the Seven to defend their town, and then they're like, hey, but we want to help too. So the rest of this movie is like filler because the community is like, hey, we want to help too, gosh darn it. And so then they, burn some time in the movie just trying to teach them, the Seven, use their individual skill sets to try to teach the town. And then the man who got away in the beginning, this earlier altercation, tells Bogue what happened. And at Sacramento, at Rose Creek. And why this is significant is John Redcorn, Jonathan Joss. He's still standing off in the corner. He's just a showpiece. He's just holding a rifle, standing in the background, looking Indian. He never evolves from being a stoic henchman. Martin does. Martin eventually says stuff. He says stuff in English. He eventually takes off his war paint. He eventually looks like he's relaxed. He's given character and depth. But Jonathan Joss's character, Denali, he's strictly Bogue's henchman. He doesn't say shit. And he's just stoic and there to do the bidding, to carry out the bidding of this white man. So then Bogue's like, all right, I gave him 3 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever it was. We're going early. We got to go and take back our town. Nobody does this to me. And so the night before Bogue and his men showed up, so really what happens is Red Harvest, he rides ahead to go, I skipped a part. He rides ahead to be a scout. Then he rides back and he's like, hey, they're a day away. We gotta get ready. We gotta get ready for this battle tomorrow. So then Denzel tells everybody, like, hey, some shit's gonna go down tomorrow. He sits down in front of the Seven. The Seven have their own meeting. And he's asked them, is everybody good for tomorrow? We're probably gonna die. Ethan Hawke already took off. He's like, is anybody else gonna stay and fight with us? He's got some demons he's got to deal with. But what about you guys? And of course, Red Harvest, stoic Indian still, just gives a subtle nod. Everyone's like, yeah, I'm in. And at this point, I was like, why is he this character? Why is he just the stoic native? Why do we keep doing that? And while everyone's sitting there in silence, just like, fuck, we just signed our life away. Tomorrow we might not make it. Tomorrow might be our last day on this earth. We're in too deep. But we can't turn back. We already made commitments to this town. We got to do it. Everyone's sitting there, and then Red Harvest has his Will Sampson juicy fruit moment, and he breaks his silence, and he says, I'm hungry. And everyone's like, what? This whole time you could speak English? And Red Harvest says, so? And he walks away. Everyone is stunned, and just breaks the tension. I freaking love this. So awesome. That they acknowledged that he was a stereotype up to this point, that the characters in the movie acknowledged that he broke character or broke the norm, that even in that reality they were like, yeah, it's a stoic native, he's not going to say anything, and he can speak English. But I wish they explored that more earlier and expanded on that throughout the movie instead of just peppering it in there toward the end, because that's really all we got. That's really the only thing that's different. And the next day is an epic battle. And I'm going to focus on Red Harvest for this one. It goes down. Red Harvest, what was interesting is he had different designs of war paint from the first time we met him to this one. And this one looks more badass. He looks like a freaking ninja in this second one. But once again, it's like, is that even accurate? At this point, I'm just like, who cares if it's accurate? Red Harvest looks fucking badass. Red Harvest looks awesome. In this second scene, because his whole like bottom half of his face is blacked out, like he just has like his face is cut in half, and his top half is all red, so you can't see his teeth, you can't see anything on the bottom, and he just looks menacing. He just looks mean. He looks awesome, and he's Comanche. It's great. And so in the battle, there's a Gatling gun that's used. They kind of just fight from the outskirts. Bogue's men just do everything they can, basically just mortar and shell the place, and then send the infantry in to take out what's left. And so that's the strategy that they take. And eventually, he sends wave after wave of his men in, and toward the end, he sends Denali in. Denali, aka Jonathan Redcorn, goes in, and he takes out Vincent D'Onofrio. Vincent D'Onofrio was, one of the seven, and he was a heavy. He was kind of a big, burly, kind of just brute. And Jonathan Joss takes him out with some arrows to the chest. And then he goes and finds Emma, and she runs into a saloon. And he goes after her to try to kill her. And that's where we have the only Indian-on-Indian action in this movie. Red Harvest versus Denali. And this Comanche battle was quick and questionable. While I like it because you had two native actors facing off, Denali, his outfit was problematic the entire show, or the entire movie rather. But he, in this scene, he's carrying a knife in his left hand, and he's got a hatchet in his right, and he's ready to go to battle, Nightwolf style. And I'm just like, he wears that every day. Every day, is that what he just shows up to work in? And they kind of have a close up on him with his knife and his hatchet, and you look at his right hand, and he has a sterling silver bracelet. And then I went back throughout the movie, he's got that sterling silver bracelet on like the whole time. When you can see his wrist, he's wearing that sterling silver bracelet. And so I went online to watch him, in interviews and stuff, just to do a little bit of research for this. And he always has that silver bracelet. I don't know if he got it in this movie and then just kept wearing it afterwards, or if he already had that and you're like, yeah, that looks native, just keep wearing that. If you have ever worn a metal bracelet, specifically a sterling silver bracelet, I want you to hold your fist in a ball, and I want you to turn it and rotate it. That metal bracelet stays in one place, and your wrist is like grinding on the inside of that sterling silver bracelet. It fucking hurts. And if you're walking around trying to kill people and hold a hatchet and a freaking knife and like take people out with a sterling silver bracelet, that's gonna hurt. It hurts. You gotta have like major digging action into your bones, into your skin. That's gotta be super uncomfortable. And what I didn't also like is why are they both wearing necklaces during a battle? It makes no sense to me. Jonathan Joss has this giant necklace. Martin has this big necklace too. And when Martin bends over to, tell him like you're a disgrace after he takes him out, after he slices him, his necklace like hangs away from his body like he's not wearing a tie clip. And I'm just like, why are they wearing necklaces? But anyway, this thing's over quick because he just, Jonathan Joss does it and like runs at him, and with no form, he just runs at him with both of his hands sticking up, and he's like, please slice my belly. That's what I want you to do. And he does that, and then he kicks him off the balcony. The fight's over. But I think the movie dressed them up this way because it needs to be painfully obvious to the audience, oh my god, these are Native Americans. We need to make it without a shadow of a doubt that the audience can say, oh yeah, those are natives. Those aren't like us. Those are different. Those people are other. Anyway, battle ends eventually. Bogue is defeated. Town saved from his reign. The gold mine people, they were released from earlier. Everything is back to, maybe not back to normal, but everything is set right, and now they can begin the healing in the town. So, of the 7, only 3 live. Vasquez, Chisholm, Denzel, and Red Harvest. Red Harvest lived. I love that. Everyone else died. So, let's go to the positives in this one. The historical accuracy should be set aside for a second. I'll take intent into account. The intent of this 2016 version was to not have 7 white guys coming in and saving the day. We've seen that movie already, and we don't need that movie to be remade because, that's every movie basically. But that movie's been made a bunch of times, and it's played out at this point. What we want is a group of misfits that are ethnically diverse misfits, because that's really what would be happening in 1879. It's a change of the original cast. It drastically changes in appearance. Antoine Fuqua wanted to have a cast of a true outcast. We wanted a black man, a mountain man, a recluse, a Native American. He wanted who's even a recluse in his own nation, tribe, community. An Asian man. He wanted a Mexican man with a bounty on his head, etc. He wanted this group of loners and outcasts to come together to do something good. There was a Native American culture advisor and a dialect coach. So this is another positive. Jane Myers. And she is actually Comanche in Blackfeet. She's worked on other movies. She worked on Wind River and she worked on Lone Ranger. So she's had previous work doing this. And I will never fault somebody. I will point out what I see. What one Navajo man sees, what one person with a podcast sees. I'll point out this, but I will never call out somebody who has that role. I would never want that job because talk about pressure to perform. But it is positive that they had somebody on that, because if she wasn't there, who knows what we would have got? Who knows what kind of crap we would have got. Overall, though, it was pretty good. I pointed out some stuff that was problematic, but it wasn't enough for me to say, I didn't like this movie. It just made me, furrow my brow and be like, what's that all about? But, it was just her. So it's kind of hard to do that when you're on an island like that and be the representative for all of Indian country. So, shouts out to Jane Myers. She killed it. She did a good job. I can only imagine what this would have been like had she not been there. Another positive, Denzel spoke to Martin like a regular person. He didn't dumb down his English, even the rush hour. Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? He didn't do that. He just spoke to him like a regular person. He spoke to him like an equal. He didn't need to do any of that. And Denzel, the biggest positive on Denzel, he spoke Comanche in this. Let's just take a moment to appreciate that. One of the greatest actors of our generation spoke Comanche in a movie. And that's a fucking win right there. I'll take that every day. And another positive is, I'm no expert with any language. I don't even speak my own language fluently. But it sounded natural. When Martin spoke, it sounded natural. A part of it helps that you're saying it super low, so you can kind of blaze through some of the stuff. But he wasn't forcing his words, and his accent was I'm sure his like accent sounded like heavy with English, like and non-regional, but overall it rolled off the tongue and it sounded authentic enough to me. Because Denzel, it sounded like he was trying to speak Comanche, whereas Martin sounded like he can speak Comanche better than Denzel, and that's all I needed. I just needed to have that demonstration that, like, hey, he's a little bit more native than Denzel, basically. Because if you've seen Hostels with Wes Studi and Christian Bale and Adam Beach and Rosamund Pike throughout the movie, and I will die on this hill with this stance, Christian Bale appears to speak better Cheyenne than Wes Studi. My opinion. But anyway, we don't need it to be perfect, but I really enjoyed that. Or Adam Beach in Wind Talkers, because I'm Navajo, that's the one that speaks to me the most. But another positive, he wore war paint that was more than just a couple of slashes across his cheeks, Martin. Because Jonathan Joss's character, that's all he had. He just went in the battle at the end of the movie. He just has like some long streaks that are just, thrown across his face. Martin's may not be historically accurate, but it was different. It wasn't just the same, like, two streaks, one streak over the cheek. There was character added to it, and they did that on purpose, I'm sure. I'm sure that was to highlight the scene, to try to set the scene through, because he is primarily mostly a non-verbal character. So they gave, and he didn't have long hair, and so they had to do what they had to do, and so they used costume design to, dress up his face paint. Which I liked, Usually they're lazy as hell with that and just a couple of streaks and they call it good, but I appreciated the effort with that. I will say, though, the one problem, well, that's negatives. I'll get to that. Same with his horse. It was cool that they did face paint. They did paint on the horse. I feel like that's like attention to detail that is kind of lost sometimes. They don't do that because the connection to a horse that people of that generation had is they were like a family member. They were connected with them. They were one with them. Avatar runs wild with that idea, with the connection of the braid with the tail, but that's essentially what happens. They were one. And so when you're dressing yourself up to get ready for battle, when you're preparing yourself for battle, you do the same with the person, with the thing that you are one with, and that is your horse. And so I like that. However, I'm unsure if you just walk around like that. And so this is, I don't know, that's more of a negative, but it's like does that supposed to perpetuate the idea that, not perpetuate, is that supposed to push the idea on the audience that he's always ready for battle? He's always in a perpetual state of battle? Like he's just always ready to die, ready to go? And another positive that really is meaningless, but to me it was important. He tracked a group of badasses. He came up on them and surprised them. And the biggest positive is he lived. He made it to the end of the movie. I loved it. He wasn't in this film just to die. He didn't have a romanticized death. Hi, Sonny Landham and Predator. Regardless of what you think of this character, for once in the Western, the Indian didn't die. And for that fact alone, I think it's great. So, negatives, where's his backstory? Everyone has somewhat of a backstory in this. We get a little bit more of a background of who they are. But with Martin, it's just, my people said I have a different path. And everyone's like, okay, well, I can respect that. And that's all we hear. That's all we hear. If you don't watch the extras, you wouldn't know that his people are still at Fort Still. If you don't know history of 1879... and where Comanche people would be, you wouldn't know that his Comanche people are at Fort Still. And he is an outcast on his own. Why is he so far from his ancestral homeland, from his people? Does he have a family? What's his history? Why is he okay joining the group? Everyone else kind of has motives and understands. Martin's just like, hey, take a bite out of this raw liver and let's call it good. But while his progress and recognition of equals on screen, he's still a noble savage. He's still a savage in this movie. In a good and bad way, a more contemporary version of the word savage, but also in the negative way. And why does he always have face paint on? Simply, okay. From a I keep saying logistical. It's not logistics. From the standpoint of ladies, I shouldn't just keep ladies in this. People who who apply stuff to their face that are listening right now. How is he applying the face paint? He is a loner. He is he lives alone. He lives by himself. How is his makeup on point? How is his face paint on point? How? I have no idea. When he rides up on the Magnificent Seven for the first time and his makeup he's got those little triangles below his face to reminisce like tears, and he's got those white dots in there. How is he doing that? He's by himself. What, does he carry around a compact with him? I don't understand. That's a detail that probably nobody cares about, but bro, I don't understand that part. Typically, this stuff is like applied in the ceremony. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's applied by other people, applied for people to demonstrate significance. It's not just for fashion. You know, my people didn't have face paint. We didn't have war paint in the same sense that it is perpetuated in the movies. So why is he just wandering around the Wild West with face paint on? Have you ever worn face paint for a day? I've worn paint for a day, and for costume paint, your face feels like it's in heat shrink, like it's suffocating, and it's uncomfortable, like you're wearing a face peel that you need to peel off, but you're not allowed to. You're telling me he's going to apply that every day with the exact same design every day with no mirror, no help? I'm not buying it. Why does he need to eat raw liver, raw heart, whatever? I'm sure, from a practical standpoint, you just can't cook everything. And we used to be primarily meat eaters, or raw meat eaters, raw eaters of meat. For the longest time, that's what people did. Everyone in society at some point consumed raw meat until we discovered fire, until we discovered the ability to cook. And then our stomach bacteria, our stomach fauna had changed, and we became less tolerant of raw foods. But you're expecting me to believe that is like Martin's character? That's Red Harvest? I don't know. I had a little bit of issue with that. So, I don't know. I think it just adds another savage idea to the movie, but, and why does he say his name is Red Harvest in English? He speaks Comanche throughout the entire movie, except for his juicy fruit moment where he's like, I'm hungry. Why does he say his name is Red Harvest? He says everything in Comanche, and he says Red Harvest. That's like me. I'm going to introduce myself in Navajo. Ian Allison. Everything in that sentence is Navajo except for my name. Ian Allison. That's in English. So I don't understand. Anyway. And then why does he have a mohawk? I'm pretty sure that's them making do. I don't think Comanches had mohawks traditionally. But he cut his hair, did something different. I think they just had to make do. Maybe it's to add to the element of his path is different. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just glad there were no goddamn feathers in his hair. And they at least didn't do that. Final thoughts. I will say this is Martin's breakout role. I am thankful for Martin. I love his work overall, and I'm just glad that he's in this. He was good in the Liberators. I liked him in the Liberators a lot. He's done a lot, and he got his start in this movie. This is still the one he gets most recognized for, but he's going to be in more shit throughout his career. He's going to have a long, long career in this industry, and I'm excited that he was in this, and I'm glad he was in this. This is a way for him to showcase his skill. He was working amongst juggernauts in the industry. Ethan Hawke, Chris Pratt, Vincent D'Onofrio, Denzel Washington. And he has the blessing of those actors and people and high-profile producers and like Antoine Fuqua who can vouch for him. Shep Proudfoot status. They can vouch for him. And now look at his career. He's off making movies all over the country, all over the world. And so it's great. And I will say, I'm just grateful to see Native men built like him. Like Tosh Collins, Martin Sensmeier. We need to show that we can be jacked. This is a little bit of an aside. The disappointment in my community when the Twilight movies came out and they showed those images of the wolf pack and then Taylor Lautner was just shredded And then you go to the natives, like none of them had abs. Like they continue to perpetuate the stereotype, at least in our community, that native men can't get abs. So it's refreshing to see like Martin and Tosh like killing it out there, like just ripped and shredded, and be able to like rock that. Because it is possible. We are out there. I say we like I'm a part of that, but I'm saying like it's pretty cool to see that, because that's pretty new. Diet, people. That's what it's all about. Diet, explosive exercises, plyometrics, whatever. And let's look at YouTube. Part of my final thoughts and wrap up is I always consult YouTube, because intent matters, but how it's received by the audience is most important, because that's what they're going to go and spew to other people. You can have all the best intentions in the world, but it all depends what the audience thinks. And it's awesome. It's all good. People think Red Harvest is a bad motherfucker, and I'll take it. He's badass. He's a badass among badasses. And he's a heartthrob. But much like Sonny Landham, he's a stoic Indian, but in a different way a little bit. He primarily speaks his language, whereas Sonny Landham didn't speak any, and he is capable. Nobody needs to explain shit to Red Harvest. Red Harvest does what Red Harvest does, and that's he just gets shit done. He is a productive, efficient member in the group. He's got no fat. He doesn't bring any baggage. There's no consoling of any way throughout this entire movie. He's just like, nah, son, get out of my way. I know what I need to do. I don't need to say like, I need a weapon. I need a bullet. Somebody help me. Oh, God. None of that. Martin's just like, give me my weapons. Get the hell out of my way. I'll kill you if you're in my way. You know, he's no Ben Yazzie from Windtalkers. Violence is a part of him. He doesn't need some white dude to teach him how to use a bow and arrow or gun. Nothing. I love that there's none of that in this movie. Yeah, so it's great. And they're freaked the fuck out when they see him. They're scared of him. So that's all. That's it. That's it. I wanted to make it under an hour. I made it to an hour and 2 minutes. Apologize, everyone. Thank you, everyone who's been hanging in there waiting for these episodes. And for those of you that are just joining and have yet to listen to many episodes, I appreciate you jumping on the train this late in the game. But hey, we got a long way to go. There's a lot of movies left on my list. And with shows like Rutherford Falls coming out, and shows like Resident Alien, and shows like Res Dogs being filmed right now, we got a lot to be excited about, and we got a lot more in store. So I'm real excited to be almost done with school so I can pick this back up and have this be more of a full-time gig that like how it was before. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Y'all have a good one.